Airline Pilot Guy, episode number 83.
Flight 209er, you're cleared for takeoff.
Roger.
LA departure 123.9.
Roger. Request connected.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from my basement studio, Studio 1A in the APG Headquarters building in Roswell, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta. On today's show, engine failures, lasers, 747-8 freighter engine ice, uniforms, stowaways, and much more. So get all settled in, tray tables and seatbacks in their upright and locked positions, electronic devices powered on. Flight 83 is ready for pushback. Hello? Whoa, that kind of just faded out really rather rapidly. Huh, that's a different version. If you're watching the video, you'll see that I'm not in my typical environment, the hotel room. Nope, I'm in my man cave in my basement dwelling in Roswell. And some of you might recognize it. I also host another podcast occasionally for the StarQuest Production Network. Well, there's a sign behind me there. A lot of great podcasts there, the StarQuest Production Network. And hosted a show, a panel talk show this morning, and I thought, you know what? I have everything set up here and for that show, so I might as well do another episode of the Airline Pilot Guy. In fact, I had meant to get a recording accomplished this past week. Let me get you up to speed on that if you care. The first couple days of the week, I was supposed to be in training, or what used to be annual training, and now it's every 9 months. But that was postponed because I received a jury summons notification in the mail, and that was supposed to be on Tuesday. Now, I lucked out because I called the night before, and they released me from the obligation of showing up for jury duty, so I was off the hook. But I'd already had the recurrent training canceled. And then I wasn't scheduled to go out until Thursday for a 2-day trip, which I did. And then I picked up a very, very early flight on Wednesday morning. And I'm talking about 3:40 sign-in time at the airport, which meant I had to get up about 2:15. And that was to ferry an airplane from Atlanta to St. Louis so that they could fly the first flight from St. Louis back to Atlanta. And then we, the co-pilot and I, rode back as deadheaders back to Atlanta, and I was back in town by about 8:30 in the morning and back to my house by about 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, something like that. So I went out on a 2-day trip on Thursday and Friday. I had planned to record, but it was one of those 3-leg, very long duty day, each day, 2-day trips. And by the time we finally got to our hotel in Panama City, I was just plumb tuckered out, if you know what I mean. I just didn't have it in me. So I joined the first officer for a nice bite to eat at a Mexican restaurant there right next to the hotel. And that was it. I thought, well, so much for this week. But hey, it's Saturday now, Saturday afternoon. And I am going to get as much recorded as I can. Now, just realized that I think around 3:30 this afternoon, a big college football game is on. University of Alabama against Texas A&M. It's supposed to be a really good game, so maybe I'll record a little bit and then maybe put that on pause and then finish up later tonight, perhaps. Who knows, right? Who knows? Okay, now, first thing I need to do is I like to do is make some corrections. So let me play this.
I'm not a smart man.
No, I'm not. First of all, my good friend Alex, who has sent me some audio feedback in the past. I said he was from Brazil. He's not from Brazil. He's actually living in the Miami area, flying for a regional airline, and he's from Colombia, South America, not South Carolina. And but anyway, I said he was from Brazil, and he's not, so sorry about that, Alex. And let's see. Oh, I need to read this post from Steve. No, not Steve. Oh, I'm just not very organized. This is from Mike Lawrence. He said, "Hi, Captain Jeff. Thanks again for doing this great podcast and helping us all to relate to what's going on up front when we're stuck out in the back of the bus. One quick comment and a correction for you. In episode number 81, you talked about potable water. I completely agree. It's pronounced potable with a long O. Thank you, Mike, for confirming that. And I mentioned on that episode that so many people mispronounce the word that it's becoming the acceptable pronunciation, potable. But it's not potable. It's potable. P-O-T-A-B-L-E. Potable. Okay, his correction for me, and I knew that when I flew up to Labrador, Newfoundland, I knew that they pronounced the name of the territory differently than I did, and I think that most of us pronounce it that aren't from Canada, Newfoundland. We put the emphasis on the Newfoundland, but I knew that that wasn't the way the locals pronounced it, and I thought it was Newfoundland, but since Mike Lawrence says he's from London, Ontario, Canada, I'm going to have to take his word for it since he's a Canadian. He says it's Newfoundland, emphasis on the land. One way to remember it, ask yourself, what happened when the weary sea-going explorers came across the ocean? They found land. Cheers. Well, thank you, Mike, for the correction. And I'll try to remember that. Newfoundland. And this is from Steve. At the beginning of Airline Pilot Guy, episode number 82, last episode, when discussing the increasing number of procedures, you questioned why there are a large number of published instrument procedures for Memphis, especially since this is not a busy passenger airport. True, but as the FedEx mothership hub, KMEM, is the first or second largest cargo airport in the world, and that's true. Very, very busy cargo operation, and if you're around, let's see, in the early to mid-evening, and then again in the wee hours of the morning, you'll see how busy it is with all the freight liners coming in from various freight liners. I'm probably offending somebody by saying freight liners because that's a brand of truck. But the big freight airplanes, the freight dogs coming in from their destination or their places to bring all the packages into the huge hub at Memphis. FedEx has 179 cargo gates at KMEM. So when you consider the hundreds of landings and takeoffs that take place here every night in a very short period of time, Memphis most likely needs a number of stars and departure procedures to handle that volume. Yeah. On the other hand, I understand your frustration on a recent early morning flight, being asked to fly a star when there was no other traffic in sight. Maybe the approach controller was just tired and lazy after the nightly FedEx onslaught. Fair skies, unlimited visibility and tailwinds. Steve Ward, Cessna 172, pilot in command in my spare time. Spare time. What does that mean? Spare time. Thank you, Steve. And yeah, I agree. I'm just becoming a curmudgeon, I think. Just if you watch or keep track of any tech shows, you have likely heard of the gentleman named John C. Dvorak. He wrote for PC Magazine for years and years and years, and he's considered a tech curmudgeon, and that's what I am too. I guess I'm turning into not a tech curmudgeon, but an aviation curmudgeon, because I just have strong feelings about certain things, and I think that sometimes we do things just for the sake of doing them, not thinking about, thinking it through. Do we really need 15 arrival procedures and 15 departure procedures for Memphis? Really? come on. I mean, Atlanta Internet. Oh, here I am. I'm being a curmudgeon again. Atlanta International used to operate years ago about the same number of flights we're operating today, maybe just a few fewer. And we had one departure procedure. It was fly. You went in one of four directions, departure gates, and you received vectors off the departing runway, and then you went to your departure gate, and then you continued your flight from there. And it worked great. And it gave the air traffic controllers a lot of flexibility. You know, if they had a whole bunch of airplanes bunched up, they could give them vectors at various points and get them all nice and spread out. Well, you get my drift. I think that sometimes these airports are competing with each other to see how many darn, official, registered arrival and departure procedures they can come up with. I don't know. I don't see the efficiency in it. But again, it could be that I'm just not a smart man.
I'm not a smart man.
And I just don't understand. I'm an old guy. Come on. 54 years old, almost 55 years old. About 10 years left in my career before they put me to bed, so to speak. Okay. Thank you, Steve. And now, let's see. Let me do this. Go over here. Sorry, I'm a little discombobulated here because my setup is a little bit different than I'm used to. So let me see. I'll play this.
Johnny, how much more coffee?
No thanks.
Coffee Fund. And last week, I thought I was outsmarting the censors on the YouTube video. But no, they slapped me right away. Said, you're playing some content that you're not supposed to be playing. And I did the singing thing. Well, I'm going to spare you that. I'm not going to sing anymore. And I'm going to play, for sure, pod-safe music relating to coffee stuff. So I've done that a few times in the past, and here's another one. I think you'll like this. I like this one. This is from Stephanie Harger, Black Coffee.
I'm feeling mighty lonesome, haven't slept a wink. I walk the floor and watch the door, and in between I drink black coffee. Love's a hand-me-down brew. I'll never know a Sunday in this weekday rule. I'm talking to the shadows. 1 o'clock.
Again, that's Stephanie
before.
Harger, Black
Lord,
Coffee.
how slow the moments go.
All right. So, Coffee Fund donators are this week Jeff, Donald, Ken, Asa, Kay, Samuel, Nicholas, Lee, Eduardo, Errol, and Andy. Thank you, everyone, for donating to my Coffee Fund. I do appreciate it. If you're interested in helping to support the show, head over to airlinepilotguy.com. Look for that little light blue button that says Buy Me a Cup of Coffee, and you'll be contributing to my coffee addiction. I do love coffee. Of course, it's not black. I have a little bit of half and half in there. And also helps me offset some of the costs of doing the show, like hosting and media serving. Not easy for me to say. And I guess I need some more coffee. And so, again, I appreciate everyone's help with that. The other thing that I forgot to mention, a couple of weeks ago, I ended my trip kind of on the early side, and I headed over to Acme's Operational Control Center, and I met up with Dispatcher Mike. You'll remember him. He has a blog called My 50%. You can find that at my50percent.com. And he let me kind of just look over his shoulder for, I don't know, Mike, what was it, about an hour or so, the last hour of his shift. and he showed me all the fancy tools that they have to work with and how they set up flight plans and such, and look at different outstanding maintenance carryover items, and looking at the weather and plotting great routes. And then he showed me some really cool planning tools, and it's pretty remarkable what these guys do. Tom's up there as well. Hi, Tom. Saw Tom on the way out after spending about an hour with Mike. Tom was working the international desk back me. But they have to really do a lot of different things by looking at weather, seeing whether the route is appropriate for the weather. They have to look at fuel planning considerations, tankering, and everything. He showed me some of those tools, and you can learn more about that kind of stuff from the dispatcher's point of view by heading over to Mike's blog, My 50%. Good stuff there. I'm learning a lot from reading his posts. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to tell you about, maybe you already know about this, but a really cool site called skyvector.com, SKYVECTOR.com, and it has the entire world covered with sectionals, high charts, low charts, etc. And then you can overlay various layers with weather and other things. Very, very cool site. Check it out, skyvector.com. And what else did I want to say here? Oh, another thing that somehow escaped my attention. A young man in Australia just completed and broke the world's record for the youngest person to travel around the world. And he did this in what's the name of the company? Cirrus. SR-22 that he borrowed from somebody, or somebody let him use. And he started from New South Wales, I think, on the coastline, and headed out over the Pacific, over to Norfolk Island, and then on to Pago Pago, American Samoa. I've been there. And then after that up to the Christmas Island. And then I think he finally made it to the Hawaiian island chain, and then one of the longest stretches between the Hawaiian Islands and the west coast of the United States, and stopped at Van Nuys, all the way across the United States up toward Greenland, along the European continent, and down through the Mediterranean, and down toward the Indonesian islands and Malaysia, and then finally back to the continent of Australia. And he has a blog on his site. It's called teenworldflight.com, teenworldflight.com. And if you click on the blog tab, you can read his blog posts starting from, I think he started around the end of June, beginning of July, and he finally returned and made it all the way around the world back September 6th, so just not too many days ago. So check that out, teenworldflight.com. His name is Ryan Campbell, 19 years old. So well done, Ryan. And it's time for us to move on to our news. A 20-year-old instructor suffered an engine out while flying with his 18-year-old student in a Jabiru J170 at Victoria Point, Australia 2 weeks ago, and all ended ruggedly, but well, for the pair in a sequence that was captured by an in-cockpit video recorder. Authorities are investigating the cause of the off-airport landing, while onlookers are impressed by the apparent calm displayed in the cockpit as the aircraft descended and the pair made preparations. The flight was a first for student Josh Matica, who was at the controls when the aircraft's engine surged. Instructor Doug Field took over and quickly calculated that from their 1,100-foot altitude, they'd be on the ground within 2 minutes. Field not only got off an emergency call, but also prepared his student for a rough landing among limited options. Field managed to put the airplane down in a pasture, evading a small pond, a tree, and a pump house, but was unable to stop the aircraft after it landed before making contact with a barbed wire fence. Field even managed to retrieve seat cushions from the rear of the aircraft, giving them to his student to shield the student's upper body from direct contact with the aircraft's instrument panel. A statement released by Pathfinder Aviation, which owns the plane, called the event a, quote, textbook execution of the forced landing procedure. And I will have a link in the show notes to the excellent video. Now, they don't have any audio associated with the video. I think they just took that off for some reason. But the video is there, and you'll be very impressed with their handling of that situation. Well done, Doug, and brand new first flight student Josh Matica. Hopefully he won't be too stunned by that experience, and he'll want to continue his flight training. I saw this. Cabin crews are now going to be, the safety of cabin crews in commercial aircraft has always been governed by the FAA, but under a new federal policy, the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, or what we like to say, OSHA, it now has oversight over issues such as hazardous chemicals, exposure to blood-borne pathogens, and hearing protection. Our cabin crew members contribute to the safe operation of every flight each day, said FAA Administrator Michael Huerta. We're taking an important step toward establishing procedures for resolving cabin crew workplace health and safety concerns. The FAA said it will work with OSHA to ensure that any new requirements will not adversely affect aviation safety. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects the operation of cabin crews now that OSHA has oversight. We might actually see the flight attendants with those big, over-the-ear hearing protectors. They probably need to wear some kind of hearing protection. It's pretty noisy back there. When you think about how much time they spend in those cabins, hearing or all that noise back there, it's not conducive to saving your hearing. That's for sure. And it's the same thing up front in the cockpit. Depending on the airplane you fly, some are very noisy and some are not quite so noisy, but you still need to be protecting your hearing with earplugs or in-ear headsets or over-the-ear headsets, whatever. If not, you're just going to lose your hearing. And we don't want that, do we? I mean, if you don't have any hearing, how are you going to listen to my show? Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you should. Well, never mind. All right. Passenger who carried 2 small homemade lasers onto a Seattle-bound jet may be to blame for the commercial aircraft's emergency landing in Spokane. Authorities say Alex Philip Langlois Miller, an unemployed chemist from Minneapolis, used the lasers to burn holes in seat fabric on the Boeing 737 during the flight, creating the smoky smell that caused the flight crew to fear a dangerous electrical fire might be smoldering somewhere in the aircraft. Miller was arrested by FBI agents after the jet, a regularly scheduled Minneapolis to Seattle flight operated by Sun Country Airlines, landed at Spokane International Airport. Investigators found the lasers, which Miller reportedly told agents he built himself, and several burn holes near his assigned seat. Federal prosecutors said Friday they'll seek a grand jury indictment this month charging Miller with willful damage to an aircraft, but didn't object to U.S. Magistrate Judge John Rogers releasing him on a $10,000 bond. So we got a dude back there with a couple homemade lasers burning holes in the seat cushions. I don't know if that guy's all there. Sounds a little weird. Not sure if that's actually a terrorist kind of thing going on there, but at least it's weird. Excuse me. A Turkish airliner made an emergency landing in the eastern Canadian city of St. John's on Friday after 2 passengers aboard suffered heart attacks, Turkish media reported. 2 2 passengers suffered heart attacks. Turkish Airlines flight TK-12, bound for Istanbul from New York, was forced to make an emergency landing after the 2 passengers had heart attacks during severe turbulence. The jetliner's cabin crew administered emergency first aid to them before making the emergency landing on their request. So I just thought that was unusual. It's not unusual to occasionally have somebody suffering a heart attack in the back of the airplane, but 2, that must have been some pretty strong turbulence. Severe? I don't know, but maybe. Another reason you should always have your seatbelts fastened, right? You never know. Okay, the 787. Yeah, we got to talk about it again. Norwegian Airlines, or Norwegian Air Shuttle, a budget airline, confirmed Monday that it had and this is a couple of weeks ago, it had briefly grounded both of its new Boeing 787 jets over the past week after the aircraft experienced technical problems. And this time, one of the problems had something to do with the braking system. You'll remember that among many systems on the 787 Dreamliner, the brakes are all electric, not hydraulically actuated brakes, as most airplanes have. Other systems on the airplane, like the air conditioning pressurization system, wing anti-icing, what else? Lots of big things now, instead of using pneumatics or hydraulics, are powered by electricity. And that's why, of course, they're having some of their teething problems with the electrical system, because it's a very, very powerful electrical system. And the brake system is all electric, which has a lot of advantages. Cuts down on the weight. There are a lot of sensors and that kind of thing that can do pretty fancy things with the brake system. But they had some kind of a indication that one of the brakes was not behaving correctly, and they couldn't figure out a way to isolate the problem and fix it. And so it was grounded for several days. The other 787 that they had a problem, also electrically related, and that had to do with they couldn't power the airplane at all from a external ground source. And the airplane was just not accepting the power from the ground. So again, we're seeing some teething pains with the 787, and that's all we have about the 787 this week, as far as I know. You heard about the Thai Airways jet that veered off the runway, left the prepared surface in, I think it was Bangkok. My Evernote application is not loading for me. Here we go. On September, just a few days ago, actually, or last week. It was flight number TG679, landing at Bangkok's, I'm not going to pronounce this, their airport late Sunday night after a flight from Guangzhou, China, with 288 passengers and 14 crew members. The Airbus 330 veered off the runway due to a landing gear malfunction, the airline said. And so we're not really sure exactly why it ended up veering off the runway. But the interesting thing here is that the airline hired some guys to go out there with black paint and paint over the Thai logo on the fuselage, and up near the front and also on the tail. And they said, well, we're doing that because we're part of the Global Star Alliance, and we wanted to protect the image of the airline and other alliance members. And they said, and it's official policy, we're supposed to do that when we have an accident. And then this was said by Marcus Rudiger in an email. We at Star Alliance do not have a policy which states that carriers must paint over the logo. So a little bit of a PR embarrassment by Thai. They really didn't need to do that. And it's quite obvious, even with the black paint over the name Thai, that this is a Thai airplane. Unless you go out there and repaint the whole darn fuselage and tail, people are going to know it's Thai Airways. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Also kind of interesting, the latest version of the 747, the 8F, the 747-8 freighter, the freighter version, was cruising along, let's see, where were they? They were going between Moscow and Hong Kong at 41,000 feet. They were in the vicinity of Chengdu, China, about 1.5 hours before landing, and the aircraft deviated to the right of its intended flight path in order to avoid a thunderstorm. And the aircraft entered a veil of cloud not displayed on the weather radar. The crew noticed a rise in air temperature but did not see evidence of ice deposit. Flight recorder data showed the static air temperature increased from minus 54 to minus 34 centigrade or Celsius for 86 seconds. The crew switched the engine ice protection system from automatic to manual, and the aircraft flew for around 10 minutes in this mode. Rosaviatsia, the NTSB of Russia, they said, before reverting to automatic. Some 22 minutes after the cloud encounter, the aircraft's inboard left-hand engine underwent a surge and automatic restart. 2 minutes later, the neighboring outboard engine experienced a speed reduction to 70% of N1, while the inboard remained at idle thrust. The aircraft landed at Hong Kong, and inspection found damage to the first stage high-pressure compressor blades of both left-hand engines as well as the outboard right-hand power plant. In a bulletin to carriers, the authority said the aircraft was caught in a region of unexpected and unpredictable weather conditions leading to an ice deposit on unheated parts of the high-pressure compressor. Rosaviatsia notes that the lack of comprehensive knowledge about crystal icing and the difficulty of detecting the phenomenon, there we go, constitutes a continuing hazard. Now, what I'm not really clear about here in this report is why did the crew go from automatic to manual with the ice control? Was it because they thought they were in icing and the automatic system wasn't sensing it and they turned it on? Or did the automatic system sense it and they didn't think they were in icing and said, hey, what's the automatic system turning the de-icing on? That's costing us fuel. Let's go to manual and turn off the icing. I don't know. It's not clear to me what occurred here. And so hopefully we'll hear a little bit more about what exactly happened. You'll remember, or you'll know, or maybe you don't, but those fancy green, yellow, and red markings on weather radar. That is actually the rate of rainfall, detecting moisture or precipitation in a cloud. And sometimes these really, really high altitude clouds are composed almost entirely of ice crystals. And these ice crystals don't show up very well or at all sometimes on radar returns because there's just not enough there to reflect the energy. And but you have to know, as a pilot, a little bit about meteorology. You have to know which way the winds are blowing up at those altitudes, and if you're deviating around a strong weather return or a strong cell, you have to kind of picture in your head, hey, we're probably flying through the overhang or ice crystals of the formation, and might be a good idea to ensure we have the anti-icing on or just avoid it completely. That's why if we can, we'll try to fly, if we're deviating around thunderstorms, we'll try to deviate on the upwind side so that we stay out of that overhang or that blow-off from the storm heading downwind from the strongest returns. So again, interesting situation. Why they switched from automatic to manual, I'd like to know. Maybe somebody out there listening knows the answer to that. And don't guess. If you're just guessing or speculating, don't tell me. If you know for sure why they did that, or if you know something about this incident, let me know, because I'd be interested to know. I can't speak at all today. It's Saturday, the weekend. I'm not used to recording a show on the weekend. And then finally, in the news section here, the anniversary, the 12th anniversary of September 11th, just occurred a few days ago. And let's see, I'm recording this on the 14th. So 3 days ago was September 11th. And 12 years before, of course, the great tragedy, the terrorists commandeering airplanes and killing a bunch of people, thousands of people, by crashing into the Trade Center towers. A good article here. I'll just read a little bit of it. I won't read the whole thing. This is thank you to a tip of the captain's hat to Liz in Washington. And I may have talked about this on previous years' episodes of the Airline Pilot Guy. I don't recall. I do remember reading this. I just don't know if I shared it with you. But this article is about Lieutenant Heather Lucky Penny. So her name is Heather Penny, and I guess her nickname is Lucky. Get it? Lucky Penny. Was on a runway at Andrews Air Force Base and ready to fly. She had her hand on the throttle of an F-16 that she had, and she had her orders bring down United Airlines Flight 93. The day's fourth hijacked airliner seemed to be hurtling toward Washington. Penny, one of the first two combat pilots in the air that morning, was told to stop it. The one thing that she didn't have as she roared into the crystalline sky was live ammunition, or missiles, or anything at all to throw at a hostile aircraft, except her own plane. So that was the plan. So this article talks about what happened that morning and the tale of she and another F-16 launched from Andrews Air Force Base and their order to basically take down United Airlines 93. And very interesting. So if you want to take a look at that, I'll have the link in the show notes. And thanks, Liz, for that. And that means it's time to head over to our mailbag.
Captain, incoming message.
Okay, let's start off with Chris. He said, first, let me take a moment to thank you for your fantastic podcast. It is such a treat for those of us outside the front office to get a glimpse of flying from your perspective. As a token of my appreciation, I've kicked in a small donation to the Airline Pilot Guy Coffee Fund. Thank you. If your travel or travels ever bring you to the Pacific Northwest, I know there's a group of fans, and myself included, who would love to get together with you over some of our fine local brews up here. And I used to travel quite a bit to the Pacific Northwest. Portland, probably my favorite city when it comes to beer. Good stuff there. So I'll definitely take you up on that, Chris. Several episodes ago, you were discussing fear of flying. I wanted to briefly share my story and talk about some of the unique ways I've dealt with it. I'm happy to say I am almost completely cured of my fear, and I actually look forward to flying most of the time now. A number of years ago, I was flying with my family on a flight from Los Angeles to Denver. Somewhere over southwestern Colorado, we hit a nasty patch of turbulence as we were approaching the backside of the Rockies. The plane, a 737-300, rolled suddenly from side to side before it seemed that the pilots were able to regain control again. The motion was jarring enough that it actually shook loose one of the overhead panels over an unoccupied row of seats near the back, and the flight attendant had to pop it back into place. I'm sure it was probably no big deal to experienced flyers, but the suddenness and sensation of brief loss of control of the aircraft frightened me enough that I dreaded flying anywhere for several years after that. Eventually, I took a job where I had to travel quite a bit by flying. It was an ordeal for me every time, but I really liked the job, so I decided I would have to get past my fear of flying. I found a website called Ask Captain Lim, that's Ask Captain Lim, LIM.com, in which Captain Lim, an airline pilot who flies primarily in Asia, answers many questions about flying, in much the same vein that you do with your podcast. Captain Lim's site has a whole section dealing with questions pertaining to fear of flying, and I started reading many of these questions and answers from a pilot's perspective. In time, I began to realize that the core of my issue was not really not being in control of the situation. The core of my issue was really not being in control of the situation. Well, short of changing careers and becoming an airline pilot, not feasible with my current family situation, I realized what I needed was knowledge. If I understood what the pilots at any given phase in flight, if I understood what the pilots, I guess there are some words missing, were doing at any given phase in flight, I could tell myself everything was normal and fine. So I bought Microsoft Flight Simulator and began to teach myself how to fly on my computer. In the process, I unlocked a whole new world of interest to me that I never really considered before. I jumped in with both feet and have since become as big of an airplane geek as anyone. I took my son up to the Boeing factory in Everett last month, and we had a great time watching the workers assemble 747s, 777s, and 787s on the factory tour. Most importantly, I no longer fear flying because I have a pretty good idea of what pilots are doing from wheels up to wheels down now. I realize this probably isn't a viable solution for everyone who has a fear of flying, but it worked for me. This gets to some of my questions now. One of the other things I really appreciated when I was a skittish flyer was the Channel 9 audio on United Airlines. I'm sure you're familiar with it. But for those who aren't, United provides an audio feed of the pilot's communication with ATC on Channel 9 of their in-flight audio system. I really appreciated this because I could rationalize that if the pilots were communicating normally with ATC, then things were just fine and there was nothing to worry about. In time, the geek in me won out, and I now enjoy listening to Channel 9 just to hear the pilots at work whenever I fly a legacy United aircraft. It's cool to be able to build a mental picture in my head of our altitude and approximate location, and based on which ARTCC center the pilots are talking to at a given point in time. I've heard that some pilots do not particularly care for Channel 9, however. Some pilots do not like the sense of someone listening over their shoulders. Apparently, it has even caused issues for a few pilots due to uninformed passengers who didn't understand what they were hearing was perfectly normal and filing complaints. While I do understand those concerns, it's one of those things I truly enjoy about flying on United. So my question is this: how do you feel about United's Channel 9 service? If Acme had a similar service, would you enable it for your passengers? Also, I know there was a recent question about some of your favorite airports to fly into. Here's a twist on that question. Are there any airports you have not yet had a chance to fly into, but would really like to someday? They could be in the United States or anywhere in the world. Thanks again for all you do, and I look forward to your next episode. Fair skies and tailwinds, Chris. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, Channel 9. I like that. If we had that at Acme, I would definitely turn it on. I'd probably need to consult with my fellow crew member though first to ensure that that was something that he or she was familiar with. Comfortable with. And but I would encourage whoever that is that was flying with me that it would be a cool thing to allow, so that folks could hear what was going on in the cockpit. I know that if I were in an airplane and if I had the opportunity to be able to eavesdrop or listen in to the air traffic control pilot conversations, I'd definitely want to do that. So absolutely, I would turn it on. I think it's very cool. I wish we had that at Acme. We don't, but I'm glad that the Legacy United airplanes have that capability. And I understand also the problems that you might have sometimes when a passenger hears you say something and them not understanding, aviation lingo, etc. They may, be upset about something. I mean, it happens to us without Channel 9 audio. If you're looking out the window and you happen to see an airplane fly by, even though they're 1,000 separated by 1,000 feet, from our altitude, sometimes the airplane appears to be pretty close. And when you think about it, 1,000 feet, think about a runway. Let's say a typical airliner runway at a big airport is about 7,000 to 9,000 feet long. That's probably the average. And so just take, 1/8 of that distance, or 1/7 of that distance of the runway, and put another airplane on it. That's only that's 1,000 feet. It's not a lot of separation when you think about it. A 10-story building, I guess, approximately. So when you're kind of banked up sometimes and an airplane's flying by and it's nice and clear, an airplane separated by 1,000 feet may appear to be awfully darn close. In fact, I've had some passengers just, visibly upset because they thought we had almost died in a mid-air collision. And we always look at them and say, no, we didn't get close to anybody. I don't know what you're talking about. But so I do see the concerns that listening to air traffic control communications may cause a problem with some people, because they just don't understand what is being said. But regardless, I would turn it on if I had the ability to do that. And your second question about if any airplane or airport that I would like to fly into that I haven't. Probably, if I could do it, I don't think it's possible anymore, but the old Hong Kong airport with the Hong Kong curve, I think they shut down that airport, so they have a new international airport in Hong Kong that doesn't have that Hong Kong curve. That would have been cool to be able to fly that. Kuala Lumpur, never been in there. I think that would be a cool place to land, a cool airport to land in. I've seen some videos on YouTube of very challenging airports to fly into, and I just can't think of their names right offhand, but that'd be kind of fun just to kind of say, yeah, I've been there. I was able to land my airplane in that place. But honestly, I'm satisfied with all the different airplanes or airports I've flown into so far, and I'm sure I'll get to experience new ones here in the future, but who knows? But that's a great question, Chris, and thanks for your feedback. All right, let's get on with the next piece of feedback. This is from Keith. He said, "Hey, Captain Jeff, I just started listening to you, episode number 79. That was the first episode. Really enjoyed it. I have a question for you. I'm currently 31 years old, and I have a mortgage, 2 awesome kids, and an above-average wife. Are you from Lake Wobegon? For work, I am a chief pilot for a Part 91 operation in New Orleans. I started school, college, bachelor degree in aviation science in 2000, and with the exception of one individual, have enjoyed flying ever since. Corporate aviation is where I've always wanted to be. I have been very fortunate 6 years ago, having acquired a type rating for the King Air 300-350 with just 800 hours in my logbook. Currently, I have 2,500 turbine multi-engine pilot in command. I absolutely love my job. 80% of my flights are to the same 2 destinations that are no longer than 55 minutes away in the 350. We hardly do any overnights and work just 2 to 3 days per week. My boss is older, treats me very well, and is very generous with both salary, nearly $90,000 per year, and fringe benefits. Again, I know how fortunate I am and have had less desirable jobs in the past, like the one that gave me the type rating. My issue is this: 75% of corporate pilots live a career life of numerous temporary positions. What I mean is that usually the jobs don't last for 20 years or longer. The reasons are numerous, of course, but it doesn't stop me from living with some anxiety because I just can't afford to lose my job. So what do you think of me making a move to the major carriers? Am I too old? No, 31 is not too old. Do you think after a few years of being with an airline that my pay will be back to where I am now? Yes. Should I just see what other great adventures that God has in store for me in the corporate world? Yeah, that's an option as well. If you're listening to, don't worry, there's no flooding here in Roswell, Georgia. Those are just the pipes of the plumbing system in my house, and apparently one of my kids upstairs is running water. So I apologize if you can hear that. So his question basically, should I move to the airline world. Obviously, you have, Keith, have a passion for what you're doing. You love flying corporate. And, in one way, I'd say, well, just stay where you are. God will take care of you. But I do understand the anxiety of the job field where corporate departments of companies come and go sometimes. They'll look at something and say, you know what, we really can't justify having a corporate flight department for this company, and we'll fly everybody corporate or charter or whatever. And so let's abolish our corporate flight department, and then there goes your job. But if you really like the lifestyle, it's hard to say one way or another, Keith. Basically, definitely make the move. You'll be much happier flying for the airlines. I can't say that. You may not be. I do fly occasionally with people that came from the corporate world, and many of them have very, very nice things to say about that lifestyle. Others say they don't miss it at all, and it's nice to fly in the airline world, especially for the major carriers, because a lot of the stuff that you're doing now are things that are taken care of by different departments in the airline, like the flight planning, the fuel planning, the load planning, the catering, dealing with passengers, all that stuff are handled by different employee groups and departments in the major airlines, in those companies. But on the other hand, you may say, I want to do all that stuff. That's part of my job. That's part of what I love doing. As far as the pay is concerned, I am confident that within a few years, and I'm basing this on what I am assuming will be the realization of a pilot shortage. You may have to, I'm not sure if you can go from the corporate to the majors in one step, or if you'll have to go through the interim route of going through the regional airlines. If you do, then it may take a while for your pay to get back to where you are now. If you are able to go directly from what you're doing now with your experience and your ratings to the majors, which you may be able to do in a few years when things start really opening up, within just a couple of years, you'll be back again to where you are now at your corporate job as far as pay is concerned. You'll probably have to work more than 2 or 3 days a week. Definitely have to work more than 2 or 3 days a week. So you're going to be away from home more than you are now. So that's one thing to consider. Again, it just depends on what you want to do, what you have a passion for. And, as you say, the money is not so important, but again, you do have to take care of your family, right? And your kids are getting older, and when they do and they're going off to college, trust me, college tuition is not cheap. So that's something to keep in mind in the future. And I don't know if you're listening out here or out there, and you have any suggestions for Keith, whether he should make the jump to the airline world or if he should stay in his corporate world, let me know. Be good to hear other people's viewpoints on that. All right. This is from Matt in Brisbane, Australia. Lovely Brisbane, Australia, he says. Just wanted to say I love the show and have been listening to it for a while now, well before the Airplane Geeks interview. Laugh out loud. Just had a quick question in relation to the ATC readback requirements in the United States. I've been listening to live ATC a fair bit and have noticed that the readbacks seem to be a lot less stringent than here in Australia. Like, for instance, saying runway 19 instead of 19er, and only saying the last digit in frequencies and QNH. Also, I hear a pilot saying, we're out of 2.5 for 4,500 instead of 2,500 and 4,500. I'm just curious as to what the readback requirements are and if this is what is taught at flying schools or has just slowly been brought in by lazy pilots over a few decades. Thanks for the awesome podcast and look forward to hopefully many more, Matt, in Brisbane. Well, Matt, I agree with you. A lot of radio communications have been, over the years, becoming more and more undisciplined. I think a lot of guys just think it's cool to say, when you're cleared for takeoff, so-and-so, Acme 1020 rolling, that kind of thing. By saying 4.2 for 5 instead of 4,200 for 5,000. Not using their call signs. Getting an instruction such as Acme 412, descend maintain 3,000, turn left heading 320, and reading back 412, 3, and 320 or something like that, kind of being very sloppy. And airlines are making note of the fact that a lot of our incident reports have to do with poor radio discipline. And if the crews had maintained proper radio discipline, they would have kept themselves out of trouble and they wouldn't be in the process of being violated by by ATC. So it's very important when we are reading back clearances from air traffic control that we do it properly. It may not sound super cool, but it will keep you out of trouble. And I think I've mentioned this in the past. I try to, when given a heading, I'll either say heading 180 or I'll even sometimes say heading 180 degrees. I'll actually use the unit so that the person hearing my readback will say, oh, no. I didn't want you heading 180. I wanted you flight level 180. That kind of thing. It really will keep you out of trouble. And again, I've read so many incident reports where people are being violated because they didn't read back the clearance properly. And if they had, the controller probably would have realized that, oh no, you misunderstood what I said. And it could have kept out a lot of trouble and saved them a lot of hassle and frustration. So if you're listening out there, you're a professional pilot. I know, suck it up. Don't be so cool. And just use proper radio discipline. It'll really pay off for you. Trust me. Okay, let's see. Let's go on. I'm skipping some of the music interludes on the show because, a lot of things to talk about that just cuts down on the length of the podcast that way. This has something to do with stowaways. You may have heard this story. This first from Ahmad. He says, hope your day is coming along smoothly. I thought you and your fellow APG audience might find this interesting. Yesterday, of course, he sent this to me back about a week ago or so, maybe even longer. In my country, Nigeria, a teenage boy sneaked onto a taxiing to depart regional jet. No details on the model, other than it is an Arik Air flight. Apparently, the boy sneak ran to the passenger-laden jet, a CRJ or a Boeing 737 new generation, I'm guessing, tucked himself into one of the wheel wells. After a 35-minute flight and a landing, he was apprehended by authorities. Anyway, check the links below for details. And so he gives me several links for the incident. Here, let me do a quick search. I believe a couple others sent me links to the story. Brian in Houston did, and Jay as well, Jay Flitton. Again, all the same incident, and I don't think any of them are identifying the actual type of airplane. I've always wondered about, well, first of all, let's talk about this one. It was a 45-minute flight from the Nigerian city to, where was it going? Lagos. And it reached an altitude of 21,000 feet. So I think the reason why this boy didn't die from being in the wheel well was that, now you'll have to know that, or you should know, that if you're in the wheel well of an airplane, it's not pressurized and it's not heated. And it's very, very cold when the outside air temperature at 21,000 feet can be really, really cold. Cold enough to make you freeze to death. The fact that it was a relatively short flight, relatively limited exposure to those extremely cold temperatures, and the fact that there was enough air or oxygen at 21,000 feet to keep from completely passing out and dying was another thing in this stowaway's favor. The thing that I don't get is, and you hear this all the time, if I jumped up into the wheel well of an airplane, whether it be a 747 or a 737, I don't know, you'd have to know where to go so you don't get crushed, or just get lucky that you're kind of, in the proper position to keep from being crushed by that landing gear coming up and the gear doors closing. I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like there's a lot of room in there, but, and of course we've heard the stories where these flights are hours long and they're up at 40-something thousand feet. And, when they lowered the gear, the body fell out, or sometimes the body stayed in the wheel well, and, people doing a walk around after the flight landed, found, the frozen corpse, in the airplane. But, yeah, this boy was lucky, I guess. That just shows you how dire the situation must be for him to want to take the risk and leave the country. Pretty sad, isn't it? This particular article that Brian in Houston sent me has some other little trivial notes regarding stowaways. It says the first stowaway, 19-year-old American Clarence Terhune, became perhaps the first aviation stowaway in 1928 after he hid himself on board the LZ-127 Graf Zeppelin airship flying from the U.S. to Germany. He was soon discovered, but was embraced by Germany. The Pittsburgh Press reported that the daring of the boy's feat thrilled the Germans and gave them a good chuckle. He was even offered a job at a department store in Aachen, while the airship was still flying over the Atlantic. Before they even got to Germany, somebody had offered him a job. In June 2010, just a few years ago, a 20-year-old Romanian man survived temperatures of minus 41 degrees Celsius inside the landing gear of a Boeing 747 on a 97-minute flight from Vienna to Heathrow. He slipped under a perimeter fence at Vienna Airport before climbing into a wheel compartment on board the empty, privately owned aircraft. A police source said that the plane would normally have flown at 37,000 feet, but due to thunderstorms, it stayed at an altitude of 25,000 feet, just low enough for the man to survive. A Nigerian man, here's Nigeria again, was able to board a Virgin Atlantic flight from New York to Los Angeles last year using an out-of-date boarding pass. And I'm not going to try to pronounce this guy's name. It's just almost unpronounceable. Was eventually taken into custody in Los Angeles after attempting to board a second flight using the same invalid boarding pass. Police found a further 10 boarding passes in his possession, none of which bore his real name. In 2009, Habib Hussein, a 25-year-old member of staff at Medina Airport in Saudi Arabia, boarded an aircraft bound for Jaipur, India, on the pretense of cleaning it. He hid in the loo and was only discovered after takeoff when another passenger attempted to use the facilities. Apparently he's not a good actor. I would have said, "Oh, excuse me, come on in. I'm sorry I took so long." And then acted like he was going back to his seat. That's what I would have done. Not that I'd be a stowaway. I'm a deadheader, not a stowaway. Roberto Visa Aguiz managed to flee Cuba on August 12, 2000, after hiding in an Air France cargo container at Havana Airport. He arrived in Paris the following day, suffering from exposure but otherwise unharmed. His application for asylum was denied, and he was eventually deported back to Cuba. Not good. And you'll remember, I think we talked about this a couple of years ago. An 11-year-old Liam Corcoran was able to board a Jet 2 flight from Manchester to Rome, despite being on his own and without a passport or ticket. He had wandered to the airport from his home 3 miles away and evaded 5 security checks. Yeah, I do remember talking about that one. Interestingly, at Acme, there was a recent bulletin that advises our flight attendants to make sure they do a thorough investigation of the crew rest facilities on these international airplanes before departure to ensure that there isn't a stowaway on board. So apparently it's happening at Acme, or perhaps the threat was there, and they're warning crews that they need to make sure that nobody is trying to get a free ride that way. So thanks, Ahmad, Brian, and Jay, for those pieces of feedback regarding stowaways. And now we'll move on to... I'm probably going to skip somebody here. If I better go back. Oh, question on localizer approach. In your last show, number 80, of course it wasn't my last show, I'm just now getting to your feedback. You gave a brief summary of the UPS 1354 crash. In the show, you said that the NTSB reported the crew was flying the localizer approach with the autopilot engaged. My question is, in the situation with the localizer only providing lateral information, does the autopilot provide any vertical control, or is that the total responsibility of the flight crew to control? What is the proper flying procedure in flying a localizer approach? From Rich McKinney in Alexandria, Virginia. Okay, so when you're flying a localizer approach, you are, as the pilot, responsible for the vertical path of the aircraft. And if the airline is using, as Acme does, CANPA procedures, which is constant angle non-precision approach procedures, CANPA, C-A-N-P-A, you basically calculate beforehand an approximate rate of descent that will keep you on an approximate or Mach precision glide path and to a derived decision altitude, which is 50 feet above the minimum descent altitude. And so you have a nice stabilized, controlled approach all the way down. And the way you do this is you're using lateral navigation if you're on the autopilot to track the localizer. So the autoflight system is tracking the lateral aspect of the flight. And you, as the pilot, through the autopilot, is controlling the vertical path. And you would do that by most airplanes, vertical speed. And so vertical speed, typically for the airplane that I fly, and I think for most transport category aircraft, a typical 3-degree glide slope would be approximately 3 degrees, and that is typically on the speeds that we fly, equates to about a 700 to 800 feet per minute rate of descent. And so you get to the final approach fix, and you roll in 700, 800 feet per minute, depending on your speed and depending on the winds and that kind of thing. And you fly this glide path. You're still on a non-precision approach, but you're trying to approximate a precision approach. And then when you reach prior to reaching or reaching, if you see the runway environment and the runway prior to reaching your derived decision altitude, then you continue on down. Just keep it a nice steady glide path to the runway. If you have not seen the runway environment, or you're just not in a position to make a safe landing, at that point you accomplish, well, not at that point, but you will be accomplishing a missed approach procedure. It gets a little bit more complicated. I don't want to bore people that don't want to know all the details of instrument approaches, but in this case, because it's not a precision approach, if you decide you have to do a missed approach, you'd have to continue. You wouldn't descend anymore because that would be dangerous. You would level off or actually start your climb to the missed approach altitude, and then you would actually execute the track on the missed approach procedure at the missed approach point, which is defined by, could be defined by DME, it could be defined by timing that you started when you were passing the final approach fix, several different ways to determine the missed approach point. But again, trying to make it as much like a precision approach as possible. That's why we are using these procedures. Now, if it were a dive and drive style approach that we used to do non-precision, you'd hit the final approach fix, You'd probably roll in 1,000 to 1,500 feet per minute, depending on, the distance between your final approach fix and your missed approach point, and, a calculated vertical descent point at that altitude, so you're in a nice, safe position to continue the approach to the runway. And again, usually somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 feet per minute, and then you would level off at the minimum descent altitude, and then you would truck in at the minimum descent altitude, the MDA, until you're at the point at which you could make a nice, easy transition to the runway, as long as you could see everything. If you can't, then obviously you continue at the minimum descent altitude to the missed approach point, and then you'd accomplish the missed approach procedure. Hope that wasn't too complicated, but that's what we do. It's using the vertical speed mode typically between the final approach fix and the visual descent point, or the derived decision altitude. So thanks for your feedback, Rich. Keep listening. Keep sending feedback. Carlos says he writes from Panama, America Central. I'm captain of a B737 new generation at Copa Airlines. I hear your comments on the podcast. I would like to speak about the landing assessment and what parameters are involved in this procedure. If it's just only to calculate the landing distance, or the pilot must to take others parameters like stabilized approach, aim point, etc. to do this assessment. Thanks in advance. Okay. So he'd like to know about our landing assessment, what parameters are involved, and calculating landing. Well, basically, for the airline that I fly for, Carlos, the dispatcher, like dispatcher Mike and dispatcher Tom, when they're planning the flight, they'll know what runways are available at the destination, how many runways are available, what the weather is like at the time, and for the forecast weather for your arrival. They'll know of any navigational aids that are out of service, any lighting that is out of service that might be necessary for a typical approach. They'll know approximately what our landing weight's going to be, and what performance is required and distance required for landings, and they have all that information at their fingertips via their computers. And so before we're even issued a flight plan, the dispatcher with certainty knows that based on all the information they have available to them, the flight can be safely completed to the destination. Now, of course, we all know that in the real world, sometimes things change when you're en route. And if you're in a situation where, let's say, the long runway at this particular place you're flying to gets shut down and they only have, let's say, one runway remaining in operation, and it's a very short runway, then we, as the pilot crew members, can do a couple different things. We can, if we have time, consult our dispatcher through our ACARS system or over the radio. That would probably be best in this situation, so you can actually have a back and forth conversation with your dispatcher to kind of look at all the options you might have, give them an accurate idea of how heavy your airplane's going to be when you arrive for landing at the destination, what the current field conditions are, whether the runway is wet, if it's grooved, etc. And then whether or not you have enough distance remaining on the shorter runway to land. It may be time to look at going to an alternate destination where the runway is longer, and then try to make some plans to get the passengers to their original destination. But we do also have manuals in our airplane, operational data manual, I think that's what the ODM stands for, where you have tables that you look up the weight of the aircraft, the condition of the runway, and crosswinds and that kind of thing. And you can see, how much runway is required. And then, of course, you look at your airport diagram to see how much available runway there is to stop the airplane. And so we can do that ourselves. But I would personally, if I were in that situation, if I had enough time, I would discuss this situation with my dispatcher and come up with a joint decision as to whether to continue the flight if we thought that was the safe thing to do, or to go somewhere else and wait for the longer runway to open up again. So that's the way we assess. I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, that's how we calculate landing distances. Normal day-to-day operations, we never get in there and look at the charts and make sure that we have enough runway to land. It's just we have made the assumption that if the long runways are operating normally, and you'll know that by before you even leave, and en route when you're picking up the automated terminal information service, the ATIS broadcast, to see what the operating runways are, any restrictions to the landing length of the runway. But the assumption's made that the full length is available and somebody has looked at this and you're good to go. But, the more experience you have, the more you'll know that, oh, wait a minute, they're saying that this runway is cut back or it's a shortened runway. For instance, I flew into Richmond last week. They're doing some work on one of the runways, and so when we were cleared to land, on runway 34 shortened. And, of course, we are. They assume that we know that there's a certain amount of runway length that has been basically placed off limits to us to use on our landing roll, and that we've made the proper calculations to know that we can stop the airplane. But with experience, you know that you can stop all day long on a runway as short as 7,000 feet, because we do it all the time at LaGuardia National Airport in Washington. If it's less than 7,000 feet, then something should be like tickling your brain, and on the airplane that I fly anyway, and we should maybe check to see what the actual distance is remaining on the runway, and what our weight's going to be, and perhaps maybe, hey Joe, why don't you pull out that ODM and let's look at the chart and make sure we have enough runway to land. So again, I hope I addressed the correct question you asked, Carlos. And thank you for listening, and it's great to have people from around the world listening to the podcast. And if there's anything you can contribute in the future, please don't hesitate. Michael Kramer writes to me, says, hey, if you're flying to O'Hare on September 29th, be careful. Why? Well, it's the O'Hare 5K, 10K on the runway. It's a 5K, 10K run. And this year, 2013, they are doing it on a new runway. Not only is this a different runway than last year, but it's a brand new one for the airport. Be one of the first to step foot on it. So there's a link here he sent me. So for all of you pilots out there flying into O'Hare on the 29th of September, watch out for those runners. You don't want to hit those runners. Not good. Thank you, Michael, for the heads up. Let's see here. Let's see. Dear Captain Jeff, hi. My name is Rachel, and I'm 13. My dad is crazy about airplanes. Now, if you ask my kids, they go, my dad's crazy, period. But no, Rachel did not say that. Rachel says, my dad is crazy about airplanes. He really likes your podcasts. While we've been listening to them, I found out that they're pretty cool. Well, thanks, Rachel. I've learned a lot of things from them. For instance, I had no idea that airline pilots could be hit by lightning several times from a thundercell, a literal bolt out of the blue. I've been wondering about how Dropbox works. Could you explain it a bit more? Sure. Dropbox, I'll do my best, Rachel, is basically a cloud service, which means that, you know what the cloud is, right? You're 13, you're living in the year 2013, you know all about computers and cloud and stuff like that. It's, online storage. It's a server somewhere in a building somewhere. It could be anywhere in the world. That you're uploading your files to via the internet. So what happens is with Dropbox, you install the application, which puts a folder on your hard drive. And it's just like any of the folders or directories that you already have on your hard drive. And anything that you drag over and put into that folder not only is it moved to that folder on your actual computer's hard drive, but it's also uploaded via the internet to the computer somewhere not where you are. Could be in Colorado. It could be in who knows where, but it's in some big air-conditioned building somewhere that has just racks and racks and racks of these computers that do nothing but store files that people send them via the internet. And so that's where they stay. So they're in the server, in the cloud, in the internet, and they're in that folder on your computer. And if you have an iPhone or an Android phone or an iPad or something like that, and you have the Dropbox application on that, then all those files are synchronized and downloaded to that device. And if you have another computer in another location, or you have like 3 or 4 computers at home, every one of them that has the Dropbox program on it has its own Dropbox folder. And so when you put in a new file, or like an audio file or a picture or something like that into the Dropbox folder, it automatically goes all those different places. And so you always have access to whatever it is that you put in your Dropbox. So it's a really, really cool program. So I hope that helped explain what Dropbox is and what Dropbox does. She says, I really like the coffee song. It makes me laugh. Java does not like me. It crashes my favorite computer game, Minecraft, sometimes. I wish they would add planes into it. Yeah, Minecraft is one of those things that uses the evil programming code Java. Most people don't need Java and probably shouldn't have it on their computers, but if you're running Minecraft, you have to have Java, which is a computer program, not the kind that you have in your coffee cup. And I agree with you. Java can be a problem sometimes on the computer. My dad wants to build a light sport airplane in his basement. Can you give him some advice? Don't do it. Just kidding. No, I can't give him any advice. I've never built my own airplane. I think it's a cool thing to do. So I'd say go for it, Dad. And let me know how that goes. And so she says, or she signs it, Rachel. P.S. from Rachel's dad, Andy, thanks for the podcast, Captain Jeff, and for helping us aviation nuts get our aviation fix. My daughter and I listen together often, and she's been bugging me to give feedback, but I haven't had much to say. I guess she forced my hand. Thanks, though, for keeping us entertained and showing her how much fun the world of flying can be. Andy in Denver, Colorado. Very cool. Thanks, Rachel. If you're watching the video, I'm waving to you right now. If not, if you're just listening to the audio, it's a virtual wave. And thanks for listening. And thanks for forcing your dad's hand and sending this feedback. And good luck, Dad, with the light sport airplane home built. I'd like to hear more about that. That sounds like fun. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick little break. Well, hello, I'm back. Excuse me. I'm back from a little bit of a break. You didn't even know it, did you? That's the beauty of podcasting, the magic of podcasting. I left and got to watch the Alabama-Texas A&M game, and looks like Alabama walloped the Aggies. Sorry out there for those of you who are Aggies fans, and you know, I went to Auburn, so I could care less really about Alabama winning or losing. But anywho, watched a little bit of the nationwide race as well, and I'm back. So let's continue with feedback. Okay. This is from Dave. He said, in case you missed it, your show on the iTunes. It said, I noticed your excellent show, finally, where it has belonged for a long time on the iPad or iTunes top charts. However, it was not there when I checked again recently, as I think it works on some sort of rotation. Yeah, sorry. Anyway, well-deserved congrats from a 100-hour never quite got his private license, but many may still yet, whose daughter just started at Auburn listener. I fly vicariously now through your show. Dave. Well, thanks, Dave, for the feedback. And I think, you know, speaking of Auburn, you know, I went to school at Auburn. And I had read a few months back that they were thinking about just dissolving or getting rid of the aviation management program, at least the professional flying option part of it. And I'm not sure, but I think that they may have somehow kept it going. So I hope that's the case, because Auburn was one of the, if not the first, but one of the first 4-year college university degree program type of thing that had a professional flying option that went along with the 4-year degree, and I hope that they'll keep that going. So thanks, Dave, for your feedback, and I know that with your daughter going to college that you probably don't have a lot of extra money to spend on renting airplanes. Jeff Felmuth writes in, he says, the link is an article, he sent me a link, about taking pilots out of the cockpits as well as our lack of stick time. Like you, I'm a strong proponent for more hand flying, as I demonstrated during my recent 737 sim check. Our 7.3s are all about LNAV and VNAV, but as the automation started messing up my emergency landing, I simply clicked it all off and flew the jet, much to the Czech airman's surprise. I know, they don't know what to do when you do that. After 5 weeks in Dallas for training, I just listened to the CA Salme interview. I don't know what that means. The California Salme? Anyway, by the way, I can't believe you couldn't find a good local beer in Philly, especially at the Reading Terminal. Yingling is my favorite. They have a good lager and a great black and tan. That's my favorite. If that's not enough for you, I'll see if I can get some of my son-in-law's homebrew honey nut ale. Yeah, do that, Jeff. Wow, I'd love to drink some homebrew. It's been a while. I used to be a homebrewer myself. I think I may have mentioned that on earlier shows. I was a very serious amateur brewer, having brewed for over 10 years. I've actually won some medals on homebrew competitions, believe it or not. But I stopped about 11, 12 years ago, maybe even longer now. Yeah, 13 years ago. All my equipment I still have. One of these days, maybe I'll start using it again. But anyway, I'd love to try some of your son-in-law's homebrew honey nut ale. Sounds good. Anyway, the link that Jeff was talking about is from Science and Technology. Let's see, what was the Economist. Cockpit automation, difference engine, crash program, ? And that starts off by saying, one day in the not too distant future, so the hoary old story goes, airliners will have only 2 crew members on the flight deck, a pilot and a dog. The pilot's job will be to feed the dog. The dog's job will be to bite the pilot if he touches the controls. Despite all the talk about drone-like autonomous passenger planes, cockpit automation is nowhere near capable enough to manage without human pilots on the flight deck. It is doubtful whether the technology, at least as it is currently configured, will ever let that happen. In theory, modern passenger planes fitted with the latest cockpit automation can fly themselves from takeoff to landing. Well, not exactly right. Shortly after takeoff to landing. In practice, pilots have to be very much in the loop, ready to intervene, or pick up the slack, as they say, when flight plans suddenly change or when one or other of the plane's automated systems start malfunctioning in a reduced operating mode, contributing to the so-called minimum equipment list. The flight crew then becomes extremely busy. A growing body of evidence indicates that while cockpit automation may be relieving pilots of mundane chores when their workload is actually low, for instance when climbing to altitude and cruising, it is causing bigger headaches than ever when the workload is particularly high, for example during takeoff, descent, approach, and landing. Air crews call it the automation paradox. Overall, cockpit automation has been a boon, at least for airlines. It saves fuel, helps with maintenance, reduces the number of crew needed on the flight deck, and cuts their training time. To some extent, it also makes it easier for pilots to qualify on other aircraft types, though there are significant differences in control philosophies between Airbus and Boeing. That aside, the overarching problem with cockpit automation stems from the way it has been implemented, with flight crew relegated from their traditional role of physically flying the aircraft to becoming essentially systems supervisors. Unquestionably, this has taken its toll on their stick and rudder skills. Instead of flying their planes, flight crew now spend most of their time in the air programming and monitoring various pieces of equipment. A typical airliner has around 90 automated systems on board, inputting data and checking that everything is working correctly. So if you want to read a little bit more about or from this article, that was just a few paragraphs there, and it's a good article, and basically says what I have been saying, and many of us, like Jeff, for quite some time, that we need to do something about, at least about the interface and feedback when it comes to automation, so that humans stay in the loop and know what the automated systems are doing at least. And we got to work ourselves away from being the managers or watchers of the automation to actively involved in what it's doing, understanding the modes of automation, etc. So, good article, and I'll have that in the show notes. Thank you, Jeff, as always, for your great feedback. Jonathan from Barbados writes, I recall that a few episodes ago, someone asked about songs to fly to. What do you think of these? And then I'm not going to play them because you know what will happen if I do that. I'll get another strike against me for copyright violations. So I'll just tell you the two that he suggested would be good to play in the background while you're flying. The Dave Matthews Band, American Baby, and Bruno Mars, Young Girls. And then he goes on to say, LIAT is an airline funded by the majority of the Caribbean governments. It is pronounced LIAT, or LIAT. They fly Dash 8s, 100s, and 300s, and a handful of ATRs. I love the story about the rivalries between the legacy carriers in episode 79. Can you perhaps include some more aviation folklore in your episodes? Sure, if I can think of any. Also, would the Frontier Shake have been hazardous to the operation of the aircraft? No. Well, at least not most transport category aircraft. Maybe some smaller airplanes that don't have as much mass. Maybe that would have affected the way the airplane was flying if people were in the back jumping up and down and doing all kinds of crazy things. But I don't really think so. CRJ versus DHC-8. Any thoughts? I don't know what you mean. Which one's better? Well, one's a jet, one's turboprop. Each of them have their advantages. Turboprops being more fuel efficient, especially the Dash 8 can get in and land on very, very short field length, short runways for both takeoffs and landings. On short segments, really there's not much difference as far as the time it takes to go from point A to point B. The longer distances, of course, the CRJ is going to beat it out because it's just faster. So that's all I know to say about that. And 787 near miss. You know what? I don't think I remember clicking on this article. Here, let me do this. And it says a LAN B788 and a LAN 788 near Lima, near collision. This is on June 11th. Let's see. One flight was going from Lima to Santiago at 41,000 feet, southbound on Upper Lima 302, nearing waypoint Iremi, and a Boeing 787-800 at LAN flight 540 from Santiago to Lima was en route at flight level 410 northbound along UL 302, crossing waypoint Iremi, IREMI, at the same time. Now, I can tell you, as a professional airline pilot, that two airplanes flying at the same altitude, one going northbound and one going southbound on the same airway, is not good. That's my expert opinion. Because, especially in today's world with the modern navigation systems we have that are very accurate, it's very likely they could have hit each other. Radar images show the aircraft head-to-head in Peruvian airspace just north of that fix, obviously responding to a TCAS resolution advisory. So apparently they did not hit. Let's see, there's some highlighting here in the article. According to information provided to the Aviation Herald, a brand new radar system has been installed by Peru in early 2012, about 18 months ago. Cost about $45 million US. The system is operating ever since, however, is not being staffed and is not being used by air traffic control at all due to internal contractual issues. The new Peruvian radar system is capable of monitoring far beyond Upper Lima 302 into the Pacific. There was no reply yet at all from the Air Traffic Control Services of Peru, even after resubmitting the questions, so that besides details of the conflict, the details about the radar system remaining unclear too, although the lack of a reply suggests the information provided so far is correct. So apparently that was a close one. That almost lost 2 Dreamliners on Upper Lima 302. That is not good. Thank you, Jonathan, for the feedback. And let's move on as soon as I can find. There we go. Lynn, my friend from SQPN. Hello, Jeff. Ever wonder what it might be like flying on a cute airplane? Of course, cute is in the eye of the beholder. The many Hello Kitty fans might be very eager to fly on a Hello Kitty decorated plane, which may be coming to an airport near them. Imagine flying on a plane decorated with Hello Kitty and her friends, sitting on a seat decorated with Hello Kitty, even tear into a snack with the Hello Kitty theme. It makes me wonder if even the cockpit might be decorated with Hello Kitty and her friends. And then she has a link to a CNN story. And she says that if you like Hello Kitty, you will really want to fly this airplane, or you may cringe if you're not a Hello Kitty fan. I don't get it. I don't get Hello Kitty. I think that's like a little kid thing, right? Or it should be. I'll have a link in the show notes if you want to check out the airplanes all decorated in Hello Kitty full regalia by Ava Air, Taiwan, I think. Isn't that Taiwanese, the airline? Or Taiwanese or Japanese? I don't know. Let's go to some audio feedback. Save me, Rob.
Hi Captain Jeff, it's Rob here from Staffordshire in the UK. You may remember me from such Airline Pilot Guy episodes as number 67, where I proceeded to yap and waffle on for, I'm not even going to say how long, but I have timed it, and my god, listening back to that is a really painful experience, and I do have to extend an apology to yourself and all of your listeners. I don't know how you didn't get any people writing in going, oh my god, who is that guy, block him, never have him on again, he's an absolute boring loser, we don't want to hear from him again. If I recall correctly, it was a really sort of sunny evening, which we don't really get too many of those in the UK. Well, actually saying that, we have had a pretty good summer, but anyway, I digress. I'd opened my first beer, it was a lovely sunny evening, and probably wasn't really the ideal time to start leaving a voice clip, because obviously got a bit too passionate about it and waffled on forever and a day. There's that. The first point I was going to make was, you mentioned in one of your recent episodes that you come across quite a few different accents, particularly European accents, over the airwaves when you're flying, and I was just going to add that one of the reasons for that is going to be not that loads of Europeans have gone over to the States to find sort of gainful employment, but there's actually quite a few companies over there that offer pilots who are looking for work time on type, basically. So say I've just I've finished all my pilot training, I've bought a type rating for the 737, but I have no time. I don't have any time on that type. So what the companies offer in the States is the ability. In fact, there's some in Europe as well. I think there's a place in Turkey that does it as well. It offers pilots the chance to build up their experience on that aircraft. So, for example, the 737. I think the sort of magic threshold for a lot of the jobs going in the aviation world is 500 hours on type, which is a lot of time, really, when you think about it. So yeah, I guess that's what a lot of sort of candidates do to make themselves seem more attractive to potential employers. So yeah, I thought I'd just add that in there. There are debates about how safe that is. I mean, obviously these are on commercial flights, so there's passengers on those flights. And in the right-hand seat, you've got somebody who hasn't even actually got a paid job in the industry yet. He doesn't even have a contract of employment. He's actually, still kind of in the training phase, if anything. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, I guess you could argue if he has a type rating, he's pretty much in a similar position as somebody who would have just been, just landed their first airline job and just passed their type rating and is now in line training. So maybe it's not too bad. I don't know. The next thing I was going to say is about Ryanair. I know they're in the news all the time, and there's been a documentary on British TV recently where some of the pilots speak out about practices at Ryanair. In particular, the fuel league tables that they keep within the company, where pressure is basically put on captains to carry the least possible fuel that they can. And this has ended up resulting in a number of incidents that have taken place in Spain in particular, I think, where people have had to declare an emergency while they're in the hold, literally because they're just running on fumes almost. And one of the senior captains that spoke out in this documentary has actually been fired since then, and Ryanair have actually taken legal action against him. And if you go to pprune.org, there's a thread on there which is really quite interesting, actually, where all sort of commercial pilots from all over the place are sort of discussing this practice and their experience in airlines and fuel policies and so on and so forth. But essentially, what they're trying to say is that, if you speak up about safety matters, you're going to get axed. And Ryanair are basically sort of arguing, no, that's not what we're doing. This person actually, made some defamatory statements, and that's why we're suing him. But, I think at the end of the day, pilots are going to be less likely to speak up if people are getting sued and fired and so on and so forth. So I thought I'd just mention that in case anybody wants to sort of get on the net and watch that documentary. The other thing I was going to say, for young pilots that are wanting to get into flying, but getting their private license is too expensive, because obviously it's a very expensive hobby, and it's not an easy one to fund. A cheaper alternative would be to get into gliding or flying sailplanes. It tends to be considerably cheaper, and you often make a lot of decent contacts and are able to network by doing so. And it's just great fun as well. It really is. Also, Sully, the guy that, from the Miracle on the Hudson, he was a glider pilot. So, it goes to show the kind of skills that you learn in the gliding environment do actually translate to the commercial world in certain times. Also, the guy that landed the Gimli glider, I believe, did have some gliding experience. So, something to bear in mind. Finally, before I go, I'm not able to see how long this is, so I'm going to try and hurry this up. It's just about I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's a European project. I think it's called the Astraeus project or something like that, where a bunch of organizations have got together and invested tons of money into basically refining things down so that the cockpit is even more computer controlled, and we basically lose the first officer, so you've just got one pilot and everything else is computer controlled. Single pilot operations, basically. I'm not happy about that at all. And that's not just because I'm hoping to one day be a pilot myself. although I think I'm probably going to end up not being the way things are going. Yeah, I don't like the idea of that. I mean, if the guy's incapacitated, what do you do then? Does somebody on the ground fly the thing down? I don't care. I'm not happy with that. I don't like the sound of it. I'm really sad that all these agencies and organizations and companies are investing so much money in it, because they're obviously, really keen to do this. And I just wish the public were more involved on this, because I think if they were, they'd be saying, well, if you do this, we're not going to be getting on planes. So, fingers crossed on that one. But, okay, so yeah, in the interest of keeping this short, and oh dear, I'm checking the time. It's not short at all. I've done it again. Oh dear. Well, sorry about that, Jeff. But, I mean, obviously, if this is too long, then go ahead and just scrap it. But yeah, keep up the good work, and I'll be listening in.
Thanks, Rob, as always. And you can make it as long as you want. I love listening to your audio feedback. It was great. Hey, and you understand now how hard it is to kind of say what you need to say or want to say in a short period of time. And then before you know it, you look down and go, oh my gosh, that was just under 8 minutes. And you covered a lot of things, and very good points, all of them. And yeah, I think it's Astrea, the project that the airlines are pumping in so much money, and aircraft manufacturers and everything else. And I'm wondering if it's because they suspect that they may have a lot of trouble finding qualified people to fly airplanes in the future, and they're thinking this might be one way to do it. I think they're sadly mistaken, but yeah, I don't blame them for trying to figure out a way to keep airplanes flying, even if there are not qualified humans to fly them. Again, I don't think it's going to work, but I don't blame them for trying. So, and Rob mentioned the PPRUNE, PPRUNE, Professional Pilots Rumor Network, which I believe is your thing, isn't it, Rob? And it's a great place to go to hang out and talk about aviation-related things. And it's a great source of information for my show, that's for sure. So thanks, as always, Rob, for your feedback. And now we move on to Rudolph. He says, hello, Captain Jeff. Again, thanks for your great show. It is for me always a delightful source of information. I've never trained as a pilot, but have always been very... before I go on, I just remembered one of the points that you made, Rob, the previous audio feedback about gliders, and the suggestion that if somebody is having trouble affording powered flight training, that they may look into getting their glider's license. And I think that's a great idea. And you're right. Sullenberger and the guy that successfully landed the dual-engine flame-out Gimli glider, they were both glider qualified, or at least had an extensive experience in gliders. And I think that was a big part of why these were not disasters, and they were actually success stories. So, and I think that gliding really gives you a feel for the aerodynamics of an airplane, and I think that's a great idea. I've always wanted to go up in a glider myself, so maybe one of these days I'll get a chance to do that. So thanks again, Rob. Okay, now back to Rudolph. I've never trained as a pilot, but have always been very interested in the field of aviation. I did many hours of Microsoft Flight Simulator and took that very seriously, also joining subsequently 2 different virtual airlines with which I did nice careers. I am Austrian, where I also live. I'm now 53 and have not been flying on Flight Simulator anymore for over 5 years by a mixture of lack of time and change of computer equipment. But I'm still a huge aviation fan. Professionally, I've been flying a lot as a passenger and continue to do so. Before things got tight in regards of security, I was regularly able to fly on the jump seat and had many very nice experiences there, as well as many interesting discussions with the crew. I have to relate to you one story which lies far back in the late 1980s. I was 27 then. The company I then worked for needed to bring in somebody with a private plane, and they asked me to accompany that person when we picked him up. They chartered a twin turboprop plane. I believe it was a Beechcraft 1900. We flew from Marseille, France, to Salzburg, Austria, where we picked up that guy, and then back to Marseille. The charter company was therefore French. As you probably know, ATC in France, with the exception of the Charles de Gaulle terminal area in Paris, talks in French to French airline crews, which I think is not a good choice anyway. So this crew was, of course, trained in English ATC, but as a small charter company, those guys did probably not fly abroad a lot. As soon as we passed from French to Swiss ATC into English, their comprehension problems started. They were just not used to English and the different accents of the Swiss, German, and Austrian ATC where we passed. As I was sitting on the jump seat, and I know my way around ATC, I started to help them. First by translating for them into French what ATC had said, then I helped them preparing the answers and requests in correct ATC English. After 20 minutes or so of this, the captain asked me if I wanted to do ATC for the remainder of the flight. You can imagine I was flattered and extremely excited, and I accepted. From about the Zurich area to Salzburg, and then the whole way back to the French border, I did the whole conversation with ATC, and when they had a hard time understanding, I translated it into French for the crew. Sounds like a story I made up, but I swear this is true. Captain Jeff, I could not agree with you more to what you have said many times about pilots losing their capability of actually flying by excessive use of technical aids. This is very worrisome, and my judgment, in my judgment, the Asiana crash in San Francisco should be a very loud alarm bell for all those responsible, and they should not blame it on the Koreans. This is a worldwide problem, which you can even feel as an enlightened passenger. The problem is that this situation is not limited to aviation only, it is more general. From people getting completely misled by GPS navigation systems in cars and even taking stairs with a car because that's what the GPS told them to do. I saw that story in a newspaper. To a loss of manual know-how in many important crafts, like painters, wood turners, etc. We could find many examples, but, of course, in a field like aviation, where security is not only extremely relevant but crucial, the situation becomes dangerous at the least. Thanks again, and good tailwinds. Well, thank you, Rudolph, for your great points. And that's really cool, your story about being on the jump seat and translating. And speaking of translating, perhaps this would be a good time to talk about this. Oh, no, I was going to look up who sent this to me. Okay, here, let me vamp a little bit. The piece of iPad software, it's an iPad app. I think it was from John Clem. Let me find my keyboard here. Av Talk. Yes, John Clem, friend of mine from SQPN. He says, check out this application on the App Store, AvTalk. All right, so let's open it up and see what we can find out. On iTunes, AvTalk is an app for iPad only and consists of 12 phases of flight to improve spoken operational aviation English for professional pilots and, let's see, professional airline pilots whose native language is not English. En route to your destination, you will encounter normal and non-normal operations. It is intended to be realistically simulated, and therefore you will hear, let me click on the More button here, and understand in a variety of less than perfect communication situations. There is vocabulary to master and questions to respond to for each phase of flight. Scrollable scripts will help you in mastering the communication and responding correctly to the questions. So basically this application is designed for people like the pilots that Rudolph flew with when he was jump seating to improve their aviation English. Now I know that many of you listening have said that the reason why, or one of the reasons at least, you listen to my show is to kind of learn more English. And that scares me a bit because I have to be very careful about using correct English. I try, at least. And but this app might be, if you have an iPad, might be something very helpful to you. Again, it's called AV Talk, AVTALK, by Ruth Imrie, IMRIE. Now, the problem is I didn't download it myself to check it out because it's $19.99. It's $20. And since I pretty much already know English, I decided not to download the app. But you might want to check it out. If you're a foreign pilot who wants to try to master their air traffic control English a little bit more, you might want to check out this app. Again, it's called AvTalk. I'll have a link in the show notes. And thank you, John, for pointing that out to me and to my listeners. All right, let's do some more audio feedback, if I can find it. Excuse me. Here we go.
Hello, Captain Jeff. My name is Fabrice Ibrahim. I'm talking from Brazil. Down here in Brazil, I'm a commercial pilot. I also have a aeronautical science degree. It's really a pleasure to talk with you. I used to listen your program a lot. It helps me either to increase my aviation knowledge, but also to keep my English up to date. As you can see, my English is not that good, but
No, it's good.
I'm trying to enhance it. Well, basically, I have two questions for you. The first one is if you have ever came to Brazil, if you already flew over here. And the second one is regarding the pressurization system of the MD-80. I would like to know when the outflow valve will be completely open during the approach and landing procedures. Let's imagine that we are flying and the cabin altitude is about 7,000 feet and our aircraft is flying actually at 30,000 feet. And then we start to descend. I would like to know what happens with the outflow valve when we pass through the 7,000 feet. Once the pressure inside the cabin is the same of the outside, the outflow valve will be completely open. That's my doubt. That's my two questions for you. And I really would like to thank you for your great work, your effort, and I wish you good landings. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And there you go. There's an example of folks that listen to the show to help them with their English. And great question about the MD-80 outflow valve and the way the outflow valve works in pressurization systems. And this is at least the way they've worked in every airplane that I've flown. So I'm assuming this is the case with all airplanes. At least in the airplane I'm flying right now, we set the landing field elevation before we even take off, actually. So if we're going from Atlanta to, let me think of a place that I know the elevation to. Well, I can't think of any offhand, but let's say we're going to Atlanta to Pensacola. The field elevation or the airport elevation there is like 100 and some odd feet. It's pretty close to sea level. We would set that destination altitude in the cabin pressurization system. And so on the way down, as your example stated, let's say our cabin altitude is 7,000 feet. When the airplane is actually in the 30-something thousand feet. And as the airplane is coming down, the outflow valve isn't fully open at 7,000 feet. It is on a schedule to meter the pressurization so that by the time you land, you're very close to your elevation at your destination airport. And when you do touch down, that's when, for most airplanes, when the ground sensing system senses that it's on the ground, the outflow valve opens up completely, and then you depressurize. Now, so going through 7,000 feet, as your example, that outflow valve is not full open because your ears would be popping like crazy from 7,000 feet all the way down to the field elevation. The pressure controller or scheduler will be still keeping the outflow valve modulating so that it's a nice smooth, and for most airplanes it's around 500 feet per minute rate of descent all the way down to the field elevation. So and the cabin altitude that you are experiencing based on your altitude is dependent upon the particular airplane and what the maximum or normal operating pressure differential is. So in most airplanes it's somewhere around 6, 7, 8 pounds per square inch differential. So it tries to do it really nice and smoothly. So when you're coming down, just to reiterate, you're not going to have the valve fully open at 7,000 feet and then open all the way down and experiencing ambient pressure. You'll be should be experiencing a nice steady descent to the field elevation all the way down until you touch down. Now, you may have noticed if you do a lot of flying, occasionally we'll set the wrong altitude in the destination airport altitude in the pressurization system. And when you touch down, all of a sudden your ears are popping like crazy. And then you look up and you go, oop, forgot to set the field elevation to the proper setting on the pressurization controller. And so when the outflow valve is fully open, it is equalizing to the actual pressure. And whereas your pressurization system, you may have set it to either a higher or even a lower altitude than you're actually experiencing, and then you have that's when your ears start popping. So that's a clear instance that the flight crew kind of screwed it up if you have a lot of ear popping as soon as you touch down. But that's the way it works. So in answer, again, to summarize, the outflow valve is not fully open at 7,000 feet. It still is modulating and mostly closed, getting more and more open as you get closer and closer to your destination and you land. So thanks again, sir, for your feedback, and keep listening and keep sending in feedback. Okay, I wonder what your passengers would think of this, writes passenger Pasadena Brian. This was something that was in the telegraph.co.uk. The perfect flight revealed. Daily Telegraph. Ever fantasized about the dream long-haul plane journey? Here's how it would unfold, according to a poll conducted by ANA, Japan's largest airline. Passengers would ideally live 9 miles from their departure airport. The survey, questioning 2,000 British adults on flight conditions, found they would naturally receive an upgrade on arrival. After that, they would board their perfect long-haul flight, destination not specified, 32 minutes after check-in. Seats would be in rows of 2, and only 66 people would be able to board the aircraft. A window seat in the middle of the aircraft was voted the perfect place to sit, according to the study, slightly contradicting the premise that passengers had received an upgrade. Back to the ANA Flight of Fancy, in which travelers would be able to take 7 kilograms of hand luggage and keep it with them instead of stowing it away. Once on board, they would discover David Williams was working as the chief of the 6-member cabin crew. Those in America apparently would rather have Marilyn Monroe or George Clooney in the cabin crew dream team. Then, as the perfect flight took off at 10:45 a.m., Prince William would, of course, be at the helm, piloting the aircraft safely through the busy skies. Champagne would be the complimentary drink of choice, served 27 minutes after departure. Then, when the first pangs of hunger hit, Jamie Oliver would whirl into action, whipping up a chicken dinner to be dished out 48 minutes after departure. For in-flight entertainment, the James Bond film Skyfall is most likely to feature at the top of the list. And napping would also feature. According to people boarding the perfect flight, they would be able to do so for an average of 31 minutes. In contrast to some recent studies, children would also be allowed on the aircraft, but only if they were quiet. Again, that is the perfect flight based on 2,000 people polled by Japan's largest airline, ANA, and this is published in the Daily Telegraph on the 29th of August, 2013. And Brian says again, I wonder what your listeners would rate or value as their perfect flight. What's important to you? Let me know. Feedback at airlinepilotguy.com or 304-997-4568, 304-997-99-pilot. Thank you. All right, Daniel, or Danielle. I'm not sure how it's pronounced in Italian. How are you? My name is Daniel, I'm going to say, Sinico, and I'm a listener of your great podcast. I'm 39 years old, and I'm a private pilot here in Italy. So continue doing your shows because they're funny and interesting to me. I wish you all the best in your family, too. I love Mad Dogs, Boeings, and Airbuses. He's an equal opportunity lover of airplanes. That's apparent. Greetings from Italy. Well, thank you, Daniel. Thanks for listening to the show, and great to have you aboard the worldwide Airline Pilot Guy community. Wow, I'm now getting into September's feedback. What day is today? Halfway through September, so I'm only 2 weeks behind. How are we doing on the time? We're probably about 2 hours now, aren't we? Couple questions on uniforms. First one by Cody. Jeff, are pilots required to get their uniforms from a specific vendor, or does the airline give you the dress code and you can purchase the items from whomever you want? I'm mainly talking about the jacket, shirt, and trousers. And in the same vein as uniforms, where is it? I had somebody else write me about uniforms. Here, let me see if I can try to find it. Yeah, if this is a first time to listen to my show or watch the video, you'll see that I'm not the most organized person in the world. This is from Cody. Here in the first in-flight state, I am in my last semester of community college, finishing up my associate's degree before I head into the fast-paced world of ATP flight school to finishing my ratings. I have a private pilot's license. During flight training, I will get my bachelor's in public admin online from a state school here in North Carolina. I figure I need to get my flight career on the ball while I'm young. Anyway, this is all rambling and has nothing to do with my question. In my free time, when I'm not either flight simming, flying for real, or listening to aviation-related media, I tend to think about the little things related to life as an airline pilot most people probably do not take the time to think about. My other two passions in life are music and fine-tailored menswear. That being said, do airlines have a specific uniform? I mean, I know that certain airlines wear blue, certain airlines wear black, some wear silver epaulets while some wear gold. But are the uniforms given to you or must be from a certain manufacturer? Or within the guidelines, can you purchase your uniform from whomever you want, say a custom tailor? And as far as shirts, can you wear long sleeves if you prefer the long sleeve variant, maybe with a nice simple cufflink with Acme's logo? And now, I'm wondering, is this from the same person, Cody? Let me go back to my feedback page. And yeah, it is. Okay. I'm sorry, Cody. I didn't realize that you sent both of these pieces of feedback. Okay, because after a while I started thinking, they're very similar. So the way it works is that Acme, and I think most airlines, specify in the operations manual what type of fabric your pants must be made from and the uniform coat. They do have certain official vendors that they recommend that you use. I think at Acme we have 2 or 3 different companies that we can use. Oh, excuse me, I don't know where that came from. Well, I do, but I'm sorry that came out. Let's see, what was I going to say? So if you buy your uniform pants or your jacket from one of the vendors that are not listed as the official suppliers, I think you just have to make sure that the fabric is the right fabric, and so that everybody kind of looks the same. The uniform, so the critical components are the pants and the jacket and the hat. Well, actually the hat are from different companies as well. So the jacket and pants, and then the shirt, of course, there are specific requirements for that. For instance, Acme, the pocket has to be a certain type of pocket. It has to have a flap. It can't have a button-down collar, although I'd really love it if we could have that, but that's not something that we're allowed to have. As far as long sleeve versus short sleeve, I'm like you. I really do like long sleeve, especially when you're wearing the uniform jacket. At Acme, we have a summer uniform and a winter uniform, and the summer uniform is the uniform pants with the short sleeve shirt. We're not allowed to wear a long sleeve shirt with the summer uniform if we're not wearing the uniform jacket. Now, in the wintertime, when the winter uniform is in in effect, which is usually sometime in October, I believe, through March, roughly. You have the option of wearing a long sleeve shirt or a short sleeve shirt. I like to wear the long sleeve shirts for a couple different reasons. Number one, you're not wearing your jacket when you're sitting at the controls of the airplane, and sometimes it gets a little chilly up there in the cockpit, and it also gives you a little bit more protection against the harmful UVA, UVB rays of the sun. I just think it really just looks better myself. Now, when I was first hired almost 25 years ago, and we were ordering uniforms, and by the way, I don't think they gave us uniforms. We had to buy them. I'm not even sure if we were given an allowance. I don't remember. That was too long ago. But we ordered our uniforms from a certain vendor that was there in the training building, or they were there. Their company's not in the training building, but they were close by, and they gave us the form to order our uniform shirts. And I asked my friend who had been with the airline for a few years before I had about this question between as far as short sleeve versus long sleeve. And his father was a longtime Acme Airlines pilot as well. And he said, "Oh, get the short sleeve. Nobody wears long sleeve shirts." And I'm thinking, well, I still think I'll order a couple long sleeve shirts because I just think it's going to look better. And so I did. And I'm noticing more and more the last few years that more and more pilots are wearing the long sleeve version of the uniform shirt during the cold winter months. And again, I just think it's a better look. As far as the French cuffs and the cufflinks, I have not seen any vendor out there that has the option of ordering a cuff, a shirt, a long sleeve that you could use a cufflink with. I'd do it if there was somebody out there that made shirts like that. But I have a feeling you'd have to go to a custom tailor to have that done. But boy, I would really I think that would be cool to have cufflinks. Yeah, I know I'm weird. Most of you listening are going, "What are you talking about, Captain Jeff? Just give me a short sleeve shirt, and that'll be good enough for me." So I hope that covered all the questions you had about uniforms, Cody. And thanks for listening, and good luck with your career in aviation and music and finely tailored clothing. All right. Now, this was sent to me by Tom. He says, Qantas pilots are outraged that a ground worker dressed up, speaking of uniforms, and I did not plan this, by the way, dressed up as a pilot and sat in the cockpit of Airbus 380 Super Jumbos on a return flight from Sydney to Dubai. The pilots' union has lodged a formal complaint with the airline about the staff member from Navigation Services who wore a second officer's uniform on the flights when she wasn't one. Qantas has yet to ascertain why she was dressed as a pilot, but confirmed that she was on company business to and from Dubai late last week, and this was last month, I believe. The staff member had a so-called red Australian security identification card, which allows her entry to restricted areas, including the cockpit, provided she has the captain's permission. However, the pilots' union emphasizes this access did not permit her to masquerade as a pilot. She is purporting to be somebody she is not, Australian and International Pilots Association Vice President Richard Woodward said. Oh, excuse me again. I'm sorry. Boy, I need to control my belches. And the point that this guy's making, in the event of an emergency, he said the flight attendants on the A380s would have looked to her for direction because she was dressed as a pilot. Mr. Woodward said the plane's captain was placed in a difficult position when this person turned up for the flight in Dubai because he had to make a snap decision about whether to leave her behind or allow her on board. So anyway, quite a stink was raised regarding this person from Navigation Services wearing a pilot's uniform, and I can understand the outrage. So I don't know if whatever came of that, if this person was punished or what, but okay, let's see. How are we doing here? I guess we'll try to quickly go through a few more items here, and then we'll call it quits for this episode. A couple of you sent me links to this article from Reader's Digest. I think Matt and Timothy sent this to me. 13 Secrets Airline Pilots Won't Tell You. And again, according to Reader's Digest. I don't know if this is a Reader's Digest and Good Morning America team in Australia or if this was somewhere else. I don't think so. It's probably a worldwide thing. And we asked 17 pilots from across the country to give us straight answers about maddening safety rules, inexplicable delays, the air and attitudes up there, and what really happens behind the cockpit door. What they told us will change the way you fly. First of all, what you don't want to know. Here's a quote from a captain in a major airline. I'm constantly under pressure to carry less fuel than I'm comfortable with. Remember the feedback about Ryanair and the documentary or whatever, the television program? Airlines are always looking at the bottom line, and you burn fuel carrying fuel. Sometimes if you carry just enough fuel and you hit thunderstorms or delays, then suddenly you're running out of gas and you have to go to an alternate airport. That's true. Sometimes the airline won't give us lunch breaks or even time to eat. We have to delay flights just so we can get food. That's from a first officer at a regional carrier. That's true. This is from a retired American Airlines pilot. We tell passengers what they need to know. We don't tell them things that are going to scare their pants off them. So you'll never hear me say, ladies and gentlemen, we just had an engine failure, even if that's true. Well, I'm going to disagree with that one. Now, I know that there are guys out there and gals that probably agree with Mr. Jim Tillman, retired American Airlines pilot, but I think that this has helped serve to fuel the idea that when we're saying something to you as a passenger, that we're lying to you. And I think that's done a lot of damage. I don't see the harm in telling you, the passenger, the truth. I really don't. It's just the way to go. Now, it may not be something you want to hear from me, but at least I'm being honest with you. And I found through my almost 25 years of commercial airline flying that when you are honest with the passengers and you tell them everything you know, they appreciate it. Even if, again, it was not news that they wanted to hear. So if I have a situation where I've lost an engine, I will tell you that we've lost an engine. But I'll also tell you that we're under control and we're doing all the procedures necessary to ensure a safe outcome. So, again, I am not of the opinion that we should be, telling you a fib or not telling you things that you really should know. Now, a lot has to do with the way you are presenting the information. And that's another thing we have to be careful about as pilots when we're talking to passengers. We have to be able to communicate with passengers so that they can understand what we're saying. Because if we give them a little information and it's not something that they can understand, it could actually make the problem worse. And so we have to be very careful about what we say, how we say it. But I think it's always important that we don't hide anything from the passengers. And that's my opinion. And I think a lot of you share that opinion, those of you out there who are professional pilots. Let's move on. The Department of Transportation has put such emphasis on on-time performance that we pretty much aren't allowed to delay a flight anymore, even if there are 20 people on a connecting flight that's coming in just a little late. And that's from a commercial pilot in Charlotte. And a lot of truth to that. The airlines are really, really into making sure that the schedule runs on time, because all the J.D. Power and Associates surveys and the feedback that we're getting from our high-value customers say we want you to run on schedule as best you can. So that's the reason why there's so much pressure about that. Here's a captain in a major airline saying, "The truth is we're exhausted. Our work rules allow us to be on duty 16 hours without a break. That's many more hours than a truck driver. And unlike a truck driver who can pull over at the next rest stop, we can't pull over at the next cloud." That's true. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to save the second half of this to talk about on the next episode. There's some good stuff in here. Good information that will help folks understand a little bit more about what goes on for us in our job. Looks like we have some drone stuff to talk about, seatbelt usage, turbulence, remote control models. Yeah, just a quick thing here. There was an incident in, I believe, in New York. A teenager was operating a remote control helicopter in a New York City park. Got struck in the head by it and killed. And he suffered a severe head injury. And I think that, he was the one that was actually operating it. That's really kind of ironic. Why I have this in here? Oh, it's because Kevin St. John sent this to me. He said, you mentioned about a small drone over a crowd suddenly went out of control and hit a man in the face, causing minor injuries. Here's a case of a remote control helicopter going out of control, hitting its ground-based pilot and killing him. I really hope these things aren't given approval to be used in populated areas. The idea of monitoring things in the Bering Sea is one thing, but using them where people congregate is another matter completely. Best wishes to you and your family. Respectfully, Kevin St. John. Thanks, Kevin. And I agree with you. But unfortunately, we're going to be seeing more and more of these drones, these unmanned aeronautical vehicles flying around us. And hopefully we won't have more episodes of people being injured or killed by them. So, well, that's going to do it for today's show. I have a 3-day trip that leaves on Monday through Wednesday. I have training on Thursday and Friday. Depending upon how much I can get accomplished as far as studying for my recurrent training on the trip, I may or may not put out an episode during my next trip. And if I do, it'll probably be a short one, which will be probably welcomed by many of you. So, that's about it. Anything else I want to say? No. Okay, well, I hope you enjoy your weekend and your week. And thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. Again, if you're watching the video on YouTube, this is really primarily an audio podcast. You can find me by going to airlinepilotguy.com. You can find me on iTunes or many of the podcast directories. And it's a great way to listen to the show. It's a very long show. You don't have to sit in front of your computer and watch me talk. You can actually put me in your ear while you're mowing the lawn or going out for a run or commuting. If you have a long drive, commute to work. If you have some of you actually listen to me while you're flying as a passenger on flights all over the world. So you should check out how to do that by learning how to download podcasts to your smartphone or your iPod or whatever. It's a great way to listen to podcasts, and there are a lot of great ones out there, by the way. And so anyway, that's all I'm going to blab about today. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you want to send feedback, you can send it to feedback@airlinepilotguy.com. Again, my call-in line, 304-99-PILOT. Go to the website, Airline Pilot Guy. You can see the little tab on the side that says send me voicemail through SpeakPipe, which is a great service. Or, as many of you have done, using your smartphone, your voice memo app or whatever recording app you have on your phone. Record something. It's great sound quality. Just attach it to an email. You have an option usually to send it via email. Send it to feedback@airlinepilotguy, and I will play it on the show. So until next time, wishing you unlimited visibility. Okay, what do I say? Wow, you can tell I'm tired, right? It's so simple. I say it at the end of every show, and now I can't remember what I say. Let me go to my outro here. I should have done the safe thing. I just read my outro. Wishing you clear skies. There we go. Unlimited visibility and tailwinds. Take care, and God bless.
Good day.